Hey everybody, we're going to go over Brain Blaster number 4. Just the answer key, we're going to get right into it because there was a lot of problems that were very difficult. Number 1, a ball is released from a height of 16 feet. Each time it strikes the ground, it bounces back to a height 1/4 of its previous height. At the instant when the ball strikes the ground for the 5th time, how many total feet has it traveled since it was released? That's going to be important. I think a lot of people think, how much did it bounce? How much did it bounce up? But it really is asking, how much does it totally bounce? It says express your answer as a mixed number. So here's my person right here dropping the ball. And if you drop the ball, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to go 16 feet, right? It's going to drop 16 feet. And then when it hits the ground, that's the first one. That's the first bounce. And it's going to go up 4 because 1/4 of 16 is 4. So it's got to go up, right? It's going to bounce up 4 feet. I mean, watch my cursor. If it's going to bounce up 4 feet, then it's going to come down 4 feet. And when it hits again, that's the second time, it is going to hit and go 1/4 of the way up, which is now going to be 1. And then it's going to go down 1, right? Think of a ball bouncing. In fact, I'm going to draw a ball right now and use my super awesome cursor. Let's see, there's a ball right there. Drops 16 bounces, 4. Drops, another 4, hits again, goes up 1, hits again. And guys, when it goes up 1, you have to go down 1 as well. Hits again, it's going to be 1/4, 1/4, hits again, 1/16, 1/16. And guys, I got to tell you, I looked at the answer key. I am so sorry. I wrote it down wrong. It is my fault because when I worked it out, I got 26 5/8. So when you add all of this up together, the total amount, it should be 26 5/8. And I looked at the answer key. I was like, I bet the people who did this were wrong, the people that actually did it. And then I went back and I searched for the last half an hour right now trying to find this answer. And lo and behold, I looked at the answer key and the answer key did say 26 5/8. I just simply wrote it down wrong. So that's my bad. My apologies. It should have been 26 5/8. So if you're a little confused by that, you did not do it wrong. That is correct. Let's go to number 2. Okay. It says a pile of clay can be molded to form a solid cube with edges of length 10 centimeters. How many solid rectangular prisms with dimensions 2, 4, and 5 can be made from the same amount of clay? This one here, we're going to find the volume of the larger cube, which is 10 by 10 by 10. I like to say area of the base times height, but you could also say length times width times height, and that's going to be 1,000 centimeters cubed. Well, how many rectangular prisms can fit inside there? The moment I hear how much can it fit inside, that is going to be a division problem, and you have to find the volume of the 2 by 4 by 5, which is going to be 40. The question is, how many times does 40 fit inside 1,000? We can cross that out. 100 divided by 4 is going to be 25 times, and that's going to be your answer. Okay, get ready because this was the toughest problem I've given you so far. It's going to be number 3. I think I did not realize how tough I made it initially. And then I started working it out and I realized how tough this would be for you guys because a lot of this math you haven't seen. So I'm going to solve this problem like you should have solved it. And it's going to be based on trial and error. So let's read it. It says when an integer is doubled and increased by 3. So here it is. Here's n. We don't know what n is, but it's doubled. So 2n plus 3. The result is means equals 5 less than the square of the integer. 5 less, look here, 5 less than the square of the integer. Again, we don't know what the integer is, but we know this is the equation. It says, what is the sum of all such integers? I'm going to tell you guys right now, if you try to get this by itself, if you try to get n by itself, it's going to be a giant mess, okay? So I'm going to show you guys what I'm guessing most students did, and I'm going to show you if you tried to solve this, you could have done this. You could have just added 5 on both sides. That's fine. You can do that. 2n plus 8 equals n squared. And the problem is, how do you get rid of n squared? You'd have to find the square root, then you have to find the square root of all of that. And you can do that. There is a way to do it, but it's going to be a little bit higher pay grade than what I have probably taught you so far this year. So instead, take a look here. Take a look at this equation. And what I'd like you to do is, if all else fails, I'm going to have to redo that. This is me looking back at my answer keys. Okay, so if all else fails, what you can do is you can start plugging in some numbers on both sides. So the very first number I want you to choose is, how about the number 0? Plug in a 0 on this side. You can do this in your head. You plug in a 0 here, plug in a 0, 0 times 2, and plug in a 0 here. And do you realize that it's not going to be equal on both sides? 0 times 2 is 0, plus 3 would be 3 on this side. Look here. This is my number I'm going to plug in. This is the number we're going to plug in right here. And then this is, you get 3 on this side and you get -5 on this side. So what you can do is you can start plugging in numbers to both sides. So let's start with 0 and let's go to number, if that's not correct, let's go to the next one. How about we choose number 1? That's another easy number we can use. Choose the number 1. And look here, you can do this in your head. Look at this side. 1 times 2 is 2, plus 3 is 5. 5 on this side. 1 squared is 1 minus 5 is going to be -4. 1 does not work. Guys, we got to keep going. Plug in a 2. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 3 is going to be 7. That doesn't work. 2 squared is 4, minus 5 is -1. And what I'm doing here is I'm just plugging in numbers until I find one that works. And you'll notice that these numbers are getting closer together. Plug in a 3 on both sides. Try it out. Plug in a 3. 3 times 2. Plug it in here first. 3 times 2 is 6. Plus the 3 is 9. So it's 9 on this side. Take a look over here. 3 squared is 9. Minus 5 is 4. And then what you're going to find is, bam, 4 works. 4 times 2 is 8, 9, 10, 11. 4 squared is 16, minus 5 is going to be 11. So on this side and this side, when you plug in the number 4, it does work. The question is, this is why it's so tough, is what is the sum of all such integers? Which means, is there another one? Is there another one that you can find? And guys, if I see the word integer, you have to know that it could be a negative number. And so when you do this and you keep working, you're going to find another number, and it's going to be the number -2. -2 does work for both sides. Take a look. Right here, -2, look at my cursor. -2 times 2 is -4. -4 plus 3, this side is -1. Take a look at -2 squared. Isn't -2 squared going to be a +4? Minus 5 is going to be a -1. So you can try out more numbers, right? And you think, oh, this would take you forever. But the higher numbers that you go, what we want you to realize is, if you choose like the number 20, choose the number 20. Well, 20 squared is 400 minus 5. There's no way that these larger numbers like 20 or 30 or 46 or even 100, when you start to get to larger numbers, you're going to realize it very quickly. It absolutely does not work. It does not work. So the sum of the two numbers that do work is 4 and -2. And so your answer is 2. 4 plus a -2 is 2. Very difficult problem. That should be a level like 6 in my opinion. All right, we have one more. And this is how I solved it. Again, you don't have to solve it the way I would, but you can. So it says the amount of water in a reservoir declines 10% each year. So every year it's getting 1/10 the amount of it was in the previous year. It says, what is the minimum number of whole years it will take until less than half of the original amount of water remains? Well, if the water level is X, so let's say we don't know what it is. So we're going to put a variable, X. then I say that X, and then we're going to take away 10% of the total. We're going to take away 10% of the total, which is 0.9X. Or you could have done this, and this is actually what I did for the rest of this problem. I said, if you have X, all right, the X amount of water, don't you have 90% of that now? Don't you have 90% because you take away 10%? So let's just find 90% of X, which is 0.9X. So I have to do that for every single one. I take this amount right here, and I'm going to find 90% of that. 90% of that gives you 0.81X. Every single year, notice how I take this amount, and I'm going to find 90% of that because that is a decline of 10%. If you're taking away 10%, that's the exact same thing as finding 90%. And I'm going to keep doing this. Look at my numbers. Look how they have a pattern here until I get less than 50%. And then bam, you could have done this a different way. That's perfectly fine. You'll notice that on year 7, see how these numbers are getting lower? On year 7, you are now below 50%. You're down below the 50% of what you originally had. So in this case, what's the answer? The answer is 7 years. Tough one. That's why I only gave you 4 this week. I know this is a tough one. I'm curious if you did this a different way. Please feel free to reach out and show me. And I hope you guys are having a great week. Talk to you soon.